Hi, I'm Malika Bilal in for Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, FIFA versus football. After corruption charges and cover-ups, what will it take to save the game? With me is digital producer Omar Majar, and he's monitoring all of your feedback to what's being called online as FIFA Gate. And so what are you seeing so far?
You know, the number of hashtags that have exploded since the indictments, there are so many of them. The biggest one is probably FIFA Gate. Take a look at my screen here. I can show you a heat map of how this exploded since Wednesday. The map shows you the first 70,000 uses of this hashtag. And when I checked today, it even crossed the 100,000 mark. Now, folks at home, you can join this conversation by tweeting us using the hashtag AJStream, and maybe you can use one of these other hashtags that trended since the scandal broke. Check them out.
Money laundering, racketeering, wire fraud. Crimes normally associated with drug cartels and the mafia. There are now charges against 14 FIFA officials. Online, some are wondering, why does it matter? Well, it's football, the world's most popular sport. And FIFA is, like the United Nations of football, only bigger. With 209 members, the World Cup has become the biggest single-event sporting competition on Earth. The last cup pulled in $4.8 billion. And with that much money and power, world football is no stranger to corruption scandals. And in this latest one, the U.S. says officials stole $150 million from FIFA, collecting bribes and kickbacks from sponsors and World Cup countries. FIFA President Sepp Blatter has survived scandal for 17 years. Re-elected on Friday, he's planning to do it for another 4.
I like you. I like my job, and I like to be with you. I'm not perfect. Nobody is perfect, but we will do a good job together, I'm sure.
Well, he's looking to the future, and the U.S. is too. Prosecutors say their case has only just begun. With us to discuss all of this in Boston, Shaka Hislop is an ESPN analyst and former professional football player for both England and his native Trinidad and Tobago. In Zurich, Jerome Champagne is former FIFA Deputy General Secretary. And in Ithaca, New York, Elliot Ross, superfan and senior editor of Football is a Country. Welcome to the stream, everyone. Now, Shaka, I want to start with you. If you've been part of this most recent FIFA Congress, would you have re-elected Sepp Blatter?
I was in the corner of Prince Ali this time around for a couple of reasons. I felt 4 terms, let alone 5, was far too many for one president to serve. It's inviting trouble. And secondly, I've not been convinced by Sepp Blatter or the culture of FIFA and how it's developed under his leadership. I thought a change was needed.
And of course, you're referencing Prince Ali of Jordan, Sepp Blatter's only competitor in this election. Jerome, what about you?
I think I would have voted for Sepp Blatter, and I can explain why. First, we have to look at the investigation. And as you know, I think your title, FIFA official, is wrong, because you may know, and your viewers need to know, that the confederations which have been accused by the U.S. Department of Justice are not members of FIFA. They are independent from FIFA. And you probably didn't know that even they refuse the FIFA administration to investigate what they're doing. Secondly, Prince Ali is a very good person. I've known him very well in my duties in FIFA, but definitely his lack of experience was definitely a factor which blocked his election.
So we have people online who are disappointed with the fact that Blatter is still in charge of FIFA. You have Mbali over here on Twitter who says the future of FIFA and soccer in general is totally bleak with Blatter still in charge again. And then you have on Facebook, Neil says, I don't know how that man sleeps at night knowing the money he has pillaged from countries and the deaths that are attributed to his name, yet somehow, insert bribe at this stage, he says, he gets re-elected to office. Now, of course, the bribe part is completely speculative on part of the person who's commenting on Facebook. But Elliot, do you think it's fair that given the fact that he was in charge of FIFA with all this, that somehow the deaths and the bribery and all these scandals effectively are counted on his head?
Yes and no. Yes, in that he's been in charge of FIFA for such a long time, and the way that FIFA runs is largely down to him. But no, in as much as these are structural problems. And so, like to the earlier question of whether I would have voted for Blatter or Prince Ali, I really don't know, because Ali didn't have much experience. He didn't put forward a very strong program, in my opinion. And I think that people are wrong to think that just if you change the guy at the top, you'll get proper change.
Well, I want to show all of our guests and our viewers a quote from a legend, a football legend. This is Diego Maradona, and speaking in an editorial in The Telegraph. All these corruption investigations are bleeding the life out of FIFA, and international football is drowning in a sea of contempt. Few sports in history have suffered the bad press that football has faced in recent years, and much of that press, he went on to write, is owed to Blatter. So that's on the one hand, but I also want to show you something else, something that has also been attributed to Blatter. This is a globe, and this shows FIFA's global footprint and really how vast FIFA is and their activities around the world. So take a look at this. You can really see their technical support, development programs really circulating the globe, and this is an interactive showing those activities. And much of that expansion has happened in Africa. It's attributed to Blatter, and it's attributed kindly. People are saying without Blatter, you wouldn't have seen that growth. Shaka?
Without question, the growth on the Sepp Blatter has been phenomenal. But then the sport has grown regardless. You can see. Let's look at one of the youngest of the leagues internationally, right here in the United States in Major League Soccer. Look at the growth that has experienced in its young history over the last 20 years. Similarly, the most cosmopolitan of the big European leagues, the English Premier League, has also experienced phenomenal growth over the last 2 decades, and that was without any kind of input from Blatter at all. So to say that football has grown because of Sepp Blatter, I think incorrect. But without question, when he took office some 20 years ago, and how football's riches were dispersed for development and other programs in some of the smaller countries, and I'm from one of those smaller countries, he is responsible for how things have gone. He is responsible for how the game has developed, how it's grown. But at some point, I feel you have to move on. You need fresh ideas. You need new faces. And we are talking about a huge, let's call it a company here. The culture within that company is down to the man at the head. If you're not pleased with the culture, and I'm one of those who I'm not, if you're not pleased with the culture, regardless of how low down the ladder is, you've got to start looking at the head of that company.
Elliot, you're nodding.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question of Africa and the smaller nations kind of gets to the heart of it, and amid the kind of outrage that we've seen, and much of it justified at these officials and at Sepp Blatter in particular, many people don't know about the longer history of FIFA. And I think it's important to discuss corruption within that longer historical frame. So there's a question of corruption in terms of bribery and kickbacks, as people have been talking about. But before 1974, FIFA was run by a bunch of white European men for their interests, for the interests of Europe. The World Cup traveled around Europe and occasionally to South America. What's happened since then? Yes, there's been a problem with corruption that's been, part of this explosion of commercialization of the game. But under Blatter, the game really has democratized, and the game has gone right around the world.
So we have people who are actually echoing the sentiment that things under Blatter have become much more international. You have Mwansa over here on Facebook who says, who would have thought that Africa or the Middle East would ever get to host a World Cup? Blatter believes in football for all. But we also have Limbani here commenting on the corruption, saying, as long as said corruption does not influence the outcome of games, us fans don't care. Jerome, do you want to take a stab at explaining to Limbani why fans should care about this corruption, how it actually impacts people?
first, Omar, I want to say that you have shown the statement by Maradona, and you have not shown the statement by Pelé. You need to know, and I'm sure you know, that Maradona has a personal revenge and vendetta against Blatter, because during the World Cup 1994, when Mr. Blatter was the General Secretary of FIFA, he refused to accept that Maradona would be brought back to Argentina supposedly because of an injury, because some people were trying to put the doping case under the carpet. Secondly, where you're right, is there's today a huge fight between, I would say, Eurocentrism. A lot of people in Western Europe believe that because they have the Champions League, because they have the best players in the world, they have a form of divine right to govern world football. And this election was clear. But I want to say that it's not Europe versus the rest of the world, because as you've heard, a lot of big federations in Europe have voted for Mr. Blatter for the very same reason I've mentioned earlier. They need someone of experience who is not perfect. And I want to say that some in Europe, and Western Europe in particular, in UEFA, want to question and suppress the one country, one vote, which exists in FIFA and makes it rather democratic.
But Elliot, you know, one of the things that I have seen online is people saying or wondering, really questioning, how many more programs, how many more activities would we have seen around the world if it hadn't been for this alleged corruption? Do you think that that's fair?
You mean could the money have been spent better? I mean,
Naturally.
almost certainly, but you'd get that with any kind of major enterprise to build infrastructure anywhere in the world, whether it was a non-profit like FIFA or a corporation. And I think that when we talk about corruption in FIFA, the interesting thing to me is that I think what angers people more than the bribery itself is the way in which FIFA runs the World Cup. Which in the last two editions particularly, you've seen these massive popular protests in Brazil and South Africa against the draining of public finances in order to support the World Cup, which benefits a bunch of national elites, sponsors, and FIFA itself. I think like the big question here for FIFA is about the World Cup. Sepp Blatter called it the goose that lays the golden eggs. I'm not sure if he quite understood what he was referring to there. But my question is kind of a deeper one. I'd be interested to hear both Shaka and Jerome talk about it. Is like, what is football for? What is the World Cup for? And you know, from a fan's perspective, the one I'm bringing today, sometimes as a fan you wonder, like, do we really need all this money? The World Cup generates a lot of money, but it's also a circus that's really inaccessible. If you go to the World Cup final, half the stadium is full of fat cats. And I think that, as much as the bribery, and I would argue more, is what angers people about FIFA and the way that FIFA has been run.
Well, Shaka or Jerome, do you want to take a stab at that question?
Well, I'll have a quick stab first of all. I mean, regardless of what tournament you go to, there's certainly any finals, there won't be enough seats to pack in all the fans who want to see the Champions League final this weekend either. That's not an issue. That's part and parcel. Part of the lifeblood of FIFA and the driving force, a lot of it is these corporate sponsors, which you have to cater to. So I don't see that as being the issue. And as long as there's enough financial support for the development programs, again, I don't think fans are that put off. And as we saw with a tweet or Facebook message earlier, as long as it doesn't interfere what happens on the field for 90 minutes, I think fans largely don't care. And I fully understand that.
So we have some backlash online about the fact that the U.S. is leading this investigation. We have Cassius here on Facebook who says it could have been reasonable if the investigation was carried out by multinational law enforcement agencies, not just the FBI, and one has to question the timing of the arrest. On the other hand, you have Mr. Chuizi here who pushes back, says the U.S. is a member nation, then there's nothing wrong with it. Someone has to reveal the rots in FIFA. Jerome, do you want to take a stab at why there's such hostility to the fact that the U.S. is leading this investigation?
Listen, they're doing their job, and I'm not questioning anything, but what we have all observed, and we all know that there's a very strong PR dimension in the way the American justice is served. You know, the famous walk of shame when someone who is indicted is shown in front of all cameras. I think what has happened is a clear problem for the presumption of innocence, and in democracy, we're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. But I don't believe in the conspiracy theory, but coming back to the World Cup, I want to stress one thing. The World Cup itself represents a cumulative TV audience of 25 billion persons. And in the world where we live, which is so fractured, so unequal, so divided, we have only football in the World Cup as a moment, which gather us together. And if you compare the TV audience with competitions like the Champions League, you see why the World Cup is so special. However, I joined some of the criticism that, for example, we could have done things better. And even though I left FIFA in 2010, for example, if you think about the street vendors around Soccer City Stadium, they couldn't work during 2 months. It would have been possible, maybe it could have been possible to find a way to associate them to the process in order to include them in the World Cup rather than pushing them aside.
You know, picking up on the point, Omar, that you made about why is the U.S. involved and there being a lot of criticism about the U.S. role, I want to play you all a clip and have you listen to this. Now, this is Russian President Vladimir Putin. He's accused the U.S. of meddling abroad, and he suggested that this crackdown is in retaliation for Russia's winning bid to hold the 2018 World Cup. So have a listen to this.
This is an obvious attempt to prevent Mr. Blatter from being re-elected the FIFA president, which is a grave violation of principles of international organisations.
Shaka, what are your thoughts on that?
I think there's a lot of misdirection that's come out ever since the arrests. The reasons for it, who it was who made the arrest, the U.S. authorities. I mean, if you go through the indictment, you understand exactly why the U.S. took the action that they did, and I think this is far beyond sport. Now, you know, those who agree say yes, is the U.S.'s role to do that. They're just protecting their own laws. Those who disagree feel that there's some ulterior motive, and I don't think so. And I think it's both sides try to spin this. There's a lot of misdirection that's coming out. I want to go back, if I can, to 5 minutes or so when Mr. Champagne was talking about Europe's role and in the elections. What's also been coming out a lot ever since the elections or before the elections was a lot of the European nations saying, well, if Blatter wins, we're going to boycott the World Cup. And I felt that rhetoric was more damaging to Prince Ali and was more supporting to Sepp Blatter's re-election than they suggested. Now, when you keep into consideration, when you consider the histories of the countries throughout Africa, of the countries throughout the Caribbean, to have Europe kind of label themselves as the bastions and guardians of all things that's right in football, had exactly the reverse effect that I think many of the European countries did. Even today, Greg Dyke of the English FA is still saying that UEFA should consider breaking away. Should consider boycotting the World Cup, which I think will be damaging to Europe. It will be damaging to their future prospects of garnering support from countries outside of UEFA.
And as Shaka was talking, there were a couple of acronyms that flew in there. And for our non-football fans who are watching this, I want to give you a taste of what he meant. So this is FIFA, and these are the continental confederations that are under FIFA. UEFA, the one Shaka mentioned earlier, represents Europe. There's also CONCACAF and CONMEBOL. Those two are at the center of this investigation. And of course, Shaka, as you were speaking, I saw both Elliot and Jerome nod their heads. Elliot, what were you thinking?
Well, I just agree with what Shaka just said. I mean, sorry, come back to me.
You disagree. Obviously, you're feeling something visceral. I know you're trying to parse your words there, but I'm interested in hearing, because you're a super fan. You also write about this. You heard what he had to say. What was going through your mind? What are you feeling?
Well, I think that what I would say is that, from my perspective, you know, the criticism that's been made of corrupt practices, that obviously has legitimacy. But I think what the European organizations have to understand, there's been this massive failure of the imagination in Europe, I think, to understand that the interests that Asian football federations and African federations and Caribbean football federations have, these are legitimate interests. These people have a stake in the world's game as well, and those interests have to be served. So if you're going to oppose Sepp Blatter, the challenge is to come up with a program which is stronger than Blatter's program for those countries and which serves football better than Blatter's program.
So one of the things that Shaka mentioned a little bit earlier, Malika, was the prospect of a boycott. And we asked that question of our community, and we have people who are tweeting and commenting on that. You have Philly here on Twitter who says FIFA will only get the message when teams start boycotting matches, when people stop buying their spin-off products. But you have some pushback from Hisham. He says boycotting is a huge ask. I know it's silly, but boycotting the game is almost impossible. Goes on to say if there was an alternative, maybe a FIFA free international league, that would be another story. Jerome, are we reaching for impossible options here when we're talking about either a boycott or an alternative to FIFA? Or do you think that just the fact that people were indicted for this might be enough to have FIFA take this whole corruption issue seriously without there to be need for further action?
Omar, I'm boiling with frustration.
Yeah.
Look at this. I want to give you an example of double standard. UEFA, the cronies of UEFA, directly or indirectly, have been basically saying in the past month that Mr. Blatter is buying votes with double standards, helping financially, FIFA helping financially African federations, and with this not so subliminal message that FIFA is buying votes. But no one is questioning, for example, that the Federation of Malta lives on the subsidies in UEFA, and we don't question the fact that probably the president of the Malta FA has voted for Prince Ali because Michel Platini has asked for it, and no one questioned that. It's an example of double standard. Coming back to your chart, I want to tell you that your chart is wrong, because for a viewer, not knowing exactly how it happens, it could be seen that the 6 continental confederations are either subsidiaries of FIFA or continental representations of FIFA, and they're not. The confederations add to FIFA what the English Premier League is to the FA, a structure which is independent, managing competition, and that chart that you're showing is wrong. And that's why a lot of protest, and to some extent boiling protest, have been developed against FIFA, because FIFA has been accused for what the Confederation of North America and the one from South America have done. So the problem is that your chart is wrong and give the wrong explanation on how it functions. Last but not least, the government of FIFA, the executive committee, is composed not by FIFA officials, but by people sent by the confederations. And when you say a FIFA vice president of CONCACAF has been arrested, it's because he's a president of CONCACAF that is there. And don't get me wrong, the fight inside is because UEFA, the wealthiest part of world football, has 8 votes out of 24. And as I said before, we are seeing today a huge attempt to break FIFA because it's the only structure which can balance the wealthiest clubs in the world and the wealthiest confederation.
Well, Jerome, I'm going to thank you for pointing that out as a former FIFA executive. That's why we have you on the show, though we did rely on FIFA information for this chart. But I want to get closing thoughts from Shaka. Do fans, those who are watching the show right now and watching you three debate this and discuss this, what role do they have to play in affecting change? Do they have a role at all?
I think fans have a role. The role that people are asking fans to do or to carry out, I think is an impossible one. People support this game long before FIFA and will support it long after FIFA in their numbers. Asking fans not to go to games or to boycott is ridiculous on a number of levels. One, as a fan watching Trinidad and Tobago, as a young boy myself, it was not about FIFA. It was about my national identity, and that's why I paid money to go through turnstiles to those games. If you're asking people to deny their own national identities, you're barking in the wrong forest. Never mind up the wrong tree. And the other thing is as we similarly ask for corporate sponsors. Corporate sponsors only care about eyeballs, and those eyeballs are on the World Cup, as Mr. Champagne pointed out earlier with some of the numbers. As long as those things remain, I think football has to police itself and turn it.
Those are the words of Shaka Hislop. You also heard from Elliot Ross and Jerome Champagne, who were nodding their heads as Shaka was talking, so we'll get their thoughts in our post-show online. But before that, a peek at our next show. Can your job be done by a robot? Do you think our jobs could be done by a robot? They might.
The bloopers won't be as fun, but yeah.
Are we going to need fewer humans working as machines take over? Scary thought, or is that the way forward? We'll take a look at how technology can impact the labor force of the future. But until then, we have the post show on FIFA. We'll see you online. Thanks for staying with us for our online post show. We're talking FIFA fraud. Let's get right back to that conversation. Before we entered into the post show, Shaka was talking about the fans, and both Jerome and Elliot were nodding their heads. Who wants to go first? Jerome?
No, I think the fans have a big role, and I'm a voting member of Barcelona, and I'm very proud of the fact that I support this club, and I'm also supporting the French club of Saint-Etienne as a member. I think we should move towards more participation of the real fans inside the administration of the clubs. I think it's a step we should encourage because fans have a big role in the game.
So we have people online also weighing in on what kind of reforms are needed to basically get fans back into this. You have Tundi here who says you need a fresh start, a fresh election with no members of the existing executives eligible to run. And then we have this video comment from Sasu. Take a listen to this.
FIFA's alleged corruption doesn't change my passion or my loyalty for the game. I've played, watched, and loved the sport for almost my entire life. However, while football is without a doubt the world's most popular sport, I do think that the FIFA situation could harm its reputation among younger generations and also among casual followers, especially in countries where it's less popular. Just the mere association with corruption could turn some people away, and I think that the situation calls for an immediate change in FIFA's regime.
Elliot, do you agree with the sentiment that you need a full overhaul of FIFA for the sake of younger fans who are just beginning to learn about football?
I think there's a pretty major overhaul needed in terms of enforcing accountability, and that links to the question I wanted to ask Shaka directly. So Shaka was talking about the question of like fans and what fans can do about all this. I'm also interested in the players' perspective. And Shaka, you have a unique perspective, having played for Trinidad and Tobago while Jack Warner wasn't directly in charge of that federation, but I understand held a great deal of influence over it. What was that like? Obviously, unaccountable football executives, that's kind of the problem that we're talking about here. And the players in football are the most important people. So I'd be really interested just to hear from you what it was like having that experience in 2006 and before, and what you think players can do in all of this to strengthen their position and to make the game cleaner and better.
And before you answer that, Shaka, just for our audience, Jack Warner was a former FIFA vice president who was also charged with corruption. Go ahead.
Certainly, and Elliot, well, to put things into better perspective, Jack Warner and I have a pretty long history going back. I played in Trinidad and Tobago when he was an executive of the Trinidad and Tobago Football Association. As a FIFA vice president, he also tried to have me banned from playing in 1994. And I stopped making myself available to Trinidad and Tobago. And then it went on up until 1998, where, you know, not 1998, sorry, excuse me. Yes, 1998. So, yes, so for 5 or 6 years. And again, I think I was denying myself what I really wanted to do, what I wanted to be as a football player. And again, it goes back to my own history as a fan. I felt I was denying myself a part of that national identity, or being a part of it, a professional part of it. And I made myself available again, though nothing had changed under Mr. Warner, though a lot of the speculation and accusations of corruption had continued. But I wanted to represent my country at higher level as I possibly can. And I think those are the underlying motivations for players, regardless of what's happening. And as a player, you also ostracize yourself from what's going on upstairs, be it at a club level, at boardroom, or be it if it's a national team, what's happening at the administration. And as far as fans playing a role, and I started saying, I think football needs to police itself, though I'm not sure how willing football would be to do that, is how do you get fans voting? How do you make fans a part of the process? A part of the process of voting in the heads of their respective FAs, who then vote in the heads of their respective confederations, who then have a say who leads FIFA as an organization. That's the role, I think, where fans would be most effective.
Well, let's pose that to Jerome. Jerome, how do you make fans more part of that process?
I think we need to do at least 3 things. First, we have a global problem, is that the globalization of football has been extremely productive for the game, but the growth of inequalities have hugely increased. For example, there's more money in African football or South American football than 20 years ago. But the gap with Europe has increased. And a lot of fans, for example, in countries in the South are not going to the stadiums anymore because the best players are playing in Western Europe. Secondly, regarding players, when I was a candidate, I proposed that we would give some seats to representatives of players, clubs, and leagues in the FIFA Executive Committee because we need to associate the stakeholders of the game to the decision-making process. And last but not least, regarding the fans, we need to look at the price of the ticketing, especially, for example, in England, but also to find a way to give a voice to the fans inside the administration of the clubs. That's why I love Barcelona so much. On the 19th of July, I will go to Barcelona and vote for the next president of the club. We will also vote for the sponsors, and that is very important. And I think that's a path which could, I would say, contravene the movement by the investors taking clubs to the stock exchange. But I think the Barca is a model for what fans can do in a club.
We're going to end it there, especially with those words, giving a voice to the fans. I love that because that's exactly what we're trying to do here. And of course, for all those of you watching, you can continue to tweet us your thoughts with hashtag AJStream. For those who already have, Omar, what are their closing thoughts?
We have a nice closing thought from a huge football fan, Footy Bedsheets, kind of a nice name actually, which says, important to recognize that football is so much more than FIFA. Grassroots movements, activism, etc., those weren't affected. Goes on to say those movements and players and lovers of football are not governed by FIFA. They cannot poison the beautiful game entirely.
Beautiful game indeed. Thank you very much to our community. Thanks to our guests as well. Now, on the next show, can your job be done by a robot? And are we going to need fewer humans working as machines take over? Scary thought, or is that the way forward? We'll look at how technology can impact the labor force of the future. And until then, see you online.